stitches, please. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is actually a tutorial. Oh my god, I have not posted one in a while. Today's video, I'm going to show you how I made this halter top that I posted on my TikTok and got deleted, but on my Instagram, loads of people wanted a tutorial and I made a poll and everyone voted for this. So that is what we're going to do today. So for this top, I used the Paintbox Cotton DK yarn and I used a 4mm hook, and this is completely optional, but I decided to do my top up with buttons. So if you would like to do that, then you will need quite a lot. I used 15 buttons, but minimum you will need one button just to close the neck. But for the back piece, you're very welcome to just do like a corset tie up. So for this top, I started with the neck piece and then worked my way down. So I'm gonna show you how I do that. I also started with a foundation single crochet, and this is also optional. You do not need to start with the foundation. You can just make a chain and then single crochet back along it. But I like to use a foundation chain just because I think it's easier than having to single crochet back into the chain. So I made my slip knot and I'm gonna chain a length that fits around my neck when it's fully pulled. With my first top, the mistake I made was that I measured it against my neck without fully pulling it tight. So that meant that the neck piece is a little bit too big, which means I sewed my button kind of further in so that it would be tighter. So for this top, I'm gonna make sure I use the right size. So just make sure that when you are trying the top on, you're like pulling it tight because crochet stretches. So if you don't, then your top might come out too big. And also we are using a single crochet for the first row, but the rest of the rows will be double crocheted, and double crochet does stretch more than single crochet. So don't worry if it feels tight, it won't be. So yeah, I'm gonna start on my foundation single crochet and I will let you know how many I do. And as usual with most of my tutorials, they're not geared for complete beginners. So if you don't know how to do any of these stitches, chains, double crochets, whatever, I would recommend that you go and watch some tutorials on that first. And then once you can do that, come back to this video. Okay, so I've chained 54 for my neck piece, and when I pull it tight, it reaches around my neck. So I'm going to start with the first row of double crochets. So for this pattern, the chain twos do count as stitches. So I'm going to start my next row by chaining 2, turning my work, and then skipping that first stitch and double crocheting straight into the second stitch. And now for this row, I'm just going to do 1 double crochet in each single crochet. So for my original top, I made my neck piece 3 rows thick, but if you want yours to be thicker, then you just do more rows, obviously. But I'm just going to stick with 3 rows, so I'm going to do another 2 rows of double crochets, remembering to count the chain 2s as stitches, and then I will meet back with you to start the actual top. So I've done my 3 rows for my neck piece, and now to measure out how big to make the top, you're going to want to grab some stitch markers. And what I did for my original top is I just put the piece around my neck and then added the stitch markers wherever I wanted my piece to be. So for example, if you want your halter top to start like really skinny, you'll want to mark out that width, and then if you want it to be bigger, then you mark out bigger and then just readjust it so it's in the middle. So for example, my original piece, I started off with 14 double crochets, and since this piece is 54 stitches long, I'm going to minus 14 and then divide it by 2, and then I'll know where to put my stitch markers. So 54 minus 14 is 40 divided by 2, so I'm going to count 20 stitches from each side and place my stitch markers. Obviously when you put your stitch markers, it's probably not going to be exactly in the middle, so just count the stitches on both sides and then like move over your stitch markers if you need to, just so that there's an even amount of stitches on both sides. Also, if you do have a bigger bust, unlike me, I would recommend that you start with a few more stitches and, you know, don't make your piece too skinny because otherwise it might not cover your boobs. So this is what my piece looks like. I have 20 stitches on each side and there's 14 stitches in the middle here. So to start my first row of the top, I'm going to do a standing double crochet. So I'm going to make a slip stitch, insert my hook, and now I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into that first stitch there, pull through a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. You can just start with a chain 3 if you want, but I like to do a standing double crochet because it just looks neater. Once I've done that, I'm going to double crochet all the way to my other stitch marker. So I've double crocheted until my other stitch marker, and now we're going to increase at the start and end of each row. So to increase at the start of the row, I'm going to chain 2. And since these chain 2s do count as stitches, all I'm going to do is turn my work and double crochet straight into that very first stitch there. And now I'm going to do a double crochet until the last stitch, and then I will show you how to increase in there. Okay, so I'm nearly at the end of my row. I'm going to do my last double crochet, and then in the last stitch to increase, I'm going to do 2 double crochets in that stitch. just like that, and that is pretty much it. So now to start my next row, again, I'm going to increase at the start and the end of each row. So chain 2, turn my work, and then double crochet into that very first stitch there. And then I'm going to do 1 double crochet all the way until the end and then do an increase in that last stitch. So I'm nearly at the end of my row. I'm going to do my last double crochet. And remember, since the chain 2s count as stitches, you'll want to do your last increase into that chain 2 space. So I'm going to insert my hook into the second chain of the chain 2 and put 2 double crochets in there. And that is pretty much it. So I'm just going to keep repeating these rows of double crochet, increasing at the start and the end until the top reaches the sides of my body. So just for reference, this is my first top, and I increased all the way until it reached my side here. So for me, that was 21 rows of these double crochets with increases. So once I've done 21 rows in total, I will meet back with you and show you how to do the rest of the top. Okay, so I finished crocheting 21 rows for my halter top, and at this point I would recommend sewing on the button so that's easier for you to try on the top and make sure that everything fits. I'm just going to use the same buttons that I used for my original top. You can use any buttons. I would recommend a button of about 1 centimeter for my hook and yarn size. If you're using a different hook or yarn, then make sure you get a button that can just fit through the stitches and is big enough to stay there. Okay, I'm not a sewing expert, so there's probably a better way to sew this button on. If you know a better way, then feel free to do that, but I'm just going to show you how I sew on my button. I just cut off a piece of yarn and I'm going to thread my needle. So I'm just going to place my button right on the edge. If you happen to make your neck piece a little bit too big, or when you try it on, the pieces overlap, just put your button a bit further down. So I'm just going to place my button where I want it and then go through the back and one of the holes on the button. And then through the other hole. And then I'm just going to do that one more time to secure it. So I'm going to go through the first hole again. And then through the other hole. And that is the button sewn on, and on the other side I'm just going to tie a knot. If you made your neck piece bigger, I would do a few more buttons, but I'm just going to do one because the back of my top is not my problem. So now I can easily try my top, and I'm going to show you how it fits just so that you have a reference for how yours should look if you want it to look the same as mine. And to actually button up the top, I literally just put the button through one of the stitches. So after 21 rows of increases on both sides, this is what my top looks like. And when I pull the top really tight, it reaches the sides of my body. So I'm going to stop doing my increases here. And now I'm just going to do a bunch of rows of double crochets with no increases until it reaches the length that I want. So I'm going to make mine again the same as my first one. So yeah, depending on how long you want your top to be, just keep trying it on and see how it fits. For my original top, I did 18 rows of just double crochets with no increases for the length that I wanted. So I'm obviously going to show you how to do that. And then once we're done with that, we can do the back piece, sew the buttons, and then we're done. It's so easy. So I just did my last increase, and now to start the first row with no increases, I'm just going to chain 2. Turn my work, and because the chain 2s do count as stitches, we're not going to double crochet into that first one, and we're going to go straight into the second stitch. And again, I'm just going to do 1 double crochet in each stitch until the end of the row. So I've nearly reached the end of this row, and I'm going to do my last few stitches. And remember to double crochet into those chain 2s because they count as stitches. And that is the first non-increase row done. I'm just going to do loads more of these until I reach the length that I want for my top. 16 rows later, and I am finally done with the front piece. And before I tie off my end, I'm just going to do a row of double crochets down the side of the top, down both sides of the top, so that there's a place for me to put the buttons through. Like on this piece here, there's a row of double crochets, so I'm just going to do the same thing. So to do the row of double crochets down the side, I'm just going to chain 2 and start putting in double crochets into these stitches. And I'm just going to try fit in roughly 2 double crochets per row. I'm going to keep doing these double crochets until I reach the first row where I didn't increase. So I've done my double crochets up until my first non-increase row, and I'm just going to slip stitch and cut off my yarn and then do the same thing on the other side. So for the other side, I'm going to start up here and then work my way down so that the stitches are both facing the same way. So again, to start, I'm going to make a slip knot and then do a standing double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook, pull through a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. And then I'm just going to continue with my double crochets until the bottom. So I've finished doing the double crochets on both sides, and this is what I've got so far. So now it's time to do the back piece for the top. This is actually optional. If you wanted to, you could just make a really long chain and then do a corset like tie up top, but I didn't really want that, so I'm going to show you how to add a back panel if you would like to. First step to doing this is putting the top on, like so. So this is what it looks like when I put it on. And now for the back piece, I'm going to do a foundation double crochet, but as usual, you can do a chain, although I really would recommend foundation double crochet because I swear the chain length is never the same as like the width of the piece, but you do you. And I'm going to foundation double crochet a chain that is long enough to reach my back, obviously, but when it's fully stretched out. So I already know how many stitches I need to do for mine because I made it for my first top, but when you've done your foundation chain or your normal chain and double crocheted into it, I would recommend that you use some stitch markers or some safety pins or something and stitch the 2 pieces together and then see if it fits. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just going to do my foundation double crochet and then I will show you how to measure it. So I foundation double crocheted 38 stitches, and I obviously know that this is the right length for me, but for you to check, if you want to grab some stitch markers, you can also do that. But around the smallest part of your waist, you're just going to want to hold it and pull it around and then see if it is like tight when you hold the pieces together. You want this to be really tight because crochet will stretch over time, so if you do make this too big, then your top will be loose. So I've only done 38. Like, this looks like a really small piece, but it stretches. And then once I've done this foundation chain, you're going to want to do the same number of rows of double crochets that you did for your non-increasing rows. So for me, I did 17 rows of just these regular double crochets, so I'm going to make a piece that has 17 rows. And again, I'm counting the chain 2s as stitches, so you'll just want to chain 2, turn your work, and crochet into the second stitch, not the very first one. So just to show you here, I have my 38 double crochets. I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and then double crochet into that second stitch. And I'm just going to do 1 double crochet in each stitch for the whole row and for the other 15 rows. Okay, so I finished crocheting the back piece and now I'm going to sew on the buttons. I'm going to sew on the buttons the exact same way I did for the neck piece. Now you might have a different number of rows, but I used 7 buttons on my top. But you're going to want to put buttons down the side pretty close together because if you don't, you might have some gaps in your top and it will stick out and you'll be able to see it from the front. So I would recommend doing as many buttons as you can fit. So this is how I'm going to do mine, and I'm obviously going to do them on both sides. So I'll just show you again how I sewed on my button. I just cut a small piece of yarn and thread it through my needle, and then put my needle through where I want the button to go. Just pull through and then go through the other hole. And then go back through the first hole one more time. And then go back through that second hole. And then just tie the 2 pieces in a knot. So I'm just going to do that for all the buttons down the side on both sides, and then we're done. Okay, so I sewed on all the buttons. Let's not talk about the ends. Okay, now I'm just going to button up one side of the top so then I can actually put it on. And I just put the buttons through the stitches like this. I literally just go in between the double crochets. So if you can see here, I literally just push the button through the stitch. And then once I've buttoned up all of those, I just put it on and then button up on the other side. And this is the finished top. I obviously still need to weave in the ends, as usual, but I will save that for another time. I hope you enjoyed and could follow along the tutorial. If you do have any questions, do comment and I will try to reply. I will also do the written pattern. However, my iPad is broken at the moment, so I can't write it. I might type it, but I do plan to get a new iPad soon. So as soon as I've got that, I will definitely make the written pattern. As usual, everything will be linked in the description, so my yarn, my Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. It would be great if you could go and follow me. Oh, I also made a new TikTok because my old TikTok region is not the UK and I can't change it to the UK, which is really annoying. So I've made a new TikTok. I will link it in the description. It would be great if you could follow and like, subscribe, whatever, if you want to see more tutorials. And I think that is pretty much it. So if you make this, please tag me. I love to see it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!